Hello everyone, welcome back to another discussion video. This was actually an idea I had recently while working on my Warriors of Darkness lore series, and I was just kind of ranking my favorite antagonists of the game just because. Now Emet-Selch easily came in first place, perhaps with Nidhogg right up there and the usual antagonists that we all know and love. But as I was listing them off, I realized I almost forgot all about Ranji, and so that got me thinking, why? I mean, he was an antagonist in Shadowbringers too, and he was on the screen even more than Vauthry, so why is he such a forgettable character? Well, today we're going to look into why. So, what can I really say about this old man? First, a quick bit of backstory on Ranji, so we can understand him better. Ranji is a descendant of Yulmorians who originated from the first versions of Doma, and has served as Yulmor's general for many years. He fought in the army against the Sin Eaters alongside the incarnations of Menphelius, many of whom he mentored. After decades of fighting though, and watching these young girls die over and over again, he came to believe that fighting the Sin Eaters is pointless, and by the time that Rean came along, he willingly decided to just imprison her rather than force her to fight what he came to believe as a pointless battle. After Thancred spirited Rean away though, his top priority has always been to recapture her, for he believes that to be her own good. But when he confronts her later on and she speaks her mind against him, perhaps for the first time, he becomes enraged before being stopped by Thancred. Now the two battle, with Thancred being the winner of that fight, though the battle nearly did kill him in the process. Later on, Ranji faced the Warrior of Darkness in Yulmor as Vauthry's last line of defense. Unlike most of the other people though, he was fully aware what Vauthry was and was serving him willingly. Ranjit is a hardened man who had given up hope for the first. He came to believe that only through someone like Vauthry, who is part Sin Eater and therefore, I guess, in a station above men, maybe then the world can find a measure of peace before it's destroyed forever. Now, the real cause of his hardened attitude on life is because he had been forced to see so many young girls as the Oracle fight and die. Terrified of losing more, he became severely overprotective of them and even resorted to locking Rean away. That's why he hated Thancred so much, for not only did he steal her away from a place of safety, but he was giving her hope for a better tomorrow, which he had long since given up. In fact, in his last few moments before he dies, he hallucinates of being reunited with all the other incarnations he knew and cared for in his life. So, I've mentioned this many times before, but I adore Shadowbringers. I mean, it's right up there with Heaven's Ward, and in my opinion, Heaven's Ward can do no wrong. But Shadowbringers was perhaps one of the best games I've ever played in the series. I love nearly everything about it. But Ranji was not one of them. Design-wise, I loved it. Both in his pre-dragon outfit and then later on in his armor. He looks amazing. But here's the thing. It almost feels like he's a budget version of Xenos. I mean, I know that sounds strange to say, but that's honestly what it feels like. I mean, we have an immensely strong opponent that we really don't know too much about, like, personality-wise at least, and yeah, that's it. Ranjit had some serious potential to be a real memorable antagonist for us to be up against, and it feels like there was supposed to be so much more to his story, like there was so much more intended to do with him, but I don't know, maybe the creators just ran out of time, or maybe they chose to focus more on Emet-Selch, and he just wasn't looked into that much, and so he was kind of like a throwaway antagonist. I feel that he was decent enough to be kind of a foil and a main antagonist to Thancred, but that's pretty much pushing it. He certainly wasn't meant to be the main enemy to the Warrior of Light or the Warrior of Darkness. That was Emet-Selch's role. While I get that he is supposed to be the best of Yulmor's army, and he has to show it, but that's really all that we got from him. His strength, while definitely surprising, isn't anything we haven't seen before in a number of other characters. Now, it should also be noted that while all of this is stated in the game, it's not overly explained to how he got so strong, other than briefly mentioning his fighting style and the creature Gukumes. We know precious little else about how he got that strong, and so where did he learn it? Is it something that was gifted to him because of Vauthry? Or what did he have to go through to earn that creature's trust, and how did he use it to fuse together with himself? I mean, it feels like Estinian in the Eye of Nidhogg. We just don't know how it works. Ranjit was just one of the few story beats that missed in Shadowbringers, at least for me, and that's for several reasons. I get that he was necessary because he served under Vauthry and he chose to follow every order he was given, I mean, Vauthry isn't the type to chase us around Norvrot himself. He would send his general to do the dirty work for him. And so Ranji had to be there just to show us just how dangerous that Vauthry and Yulmore was against us slaying the Light Wardens. But here's the thing. Ranjit, I feel, was just a wasted character. We have a world-weary, strong foe that we're up against, who grew up in a world that was all about fighting Sin Eaters and losing hope for the future. He has cool abilities, including a dragon to fight at his side, and was once dedicated his life to fighting the Sin Eaters, been the leader of an army who is 100% loyal to him, and had brought them countless victories, but became disillusioned with fighting when the girls he loved and raised like daughters were all cut down one after the other. That is a good setup. I would normally expect a strong leader who cares for his men, and while protective over the Oracle, he would still show some feelings of care or kindness to them. But instead, we just get a jerk. I mean, take a look at Gaius, for example. He is a surprisingly reasonable guy who does care about his people and his homeland, and especially cares about those who choose to follow him. He doesn't say race or creed, and his entire mantra, I guess, is, if you fight for me, I will treat you with the same loyalty and respect that you show me. That's the kind of attitude that we have from him. That's what makes him such a good leader, and why so many choose to follow him and even are willing to die for him. It's also why players really do enjoy him, and we're actually pretty thrilled that the Shadow Hunter turned out to be Gaius. Ranjit, on the other hand, is anything but that. He's not reasonable at all, and he doesn't care about his own men, who, again, are completely devoted to him and have so much faith in him, but he doesn't seem to care about them at all. There is nothing likable about this guy. I mean, his mindset is simple. I have a mission, and complete that mission no matter the cost. Make any sacrifice to see it through and take down anyone who stands in the way. That's how he thinks here. This is shown again and again, such as when he threatened the Pixies in Ilmeg, or more especially when he was willing to have all of the Knights Blessed die from poison, and willingly chooses to kill his assistant who offered a truce, even just a temporary one, rather than accept any compromise. The only exception to this rule is when he makes the effort to go to the Crystarium to speak with the Exarch face to face. He knows that it's a bad idea to just attack them outright without knowing the full scope of his opponent and what is going on. Here, he's willing to at least talk, but only about a complete surrender. No bargaining, no compromise. He's coming straight out and telling the Exarch that they will either surrender or they will attack. So here, he's at least willing to talk to the Exarch. However, he only wants to hear words of a complete surrender. No bargaining, no compromise. He came right on out and told him that he will either surrender to them completely or they will launch an attack. I will give him this much. He's at least smart enough to try and meet with the Exarch to see what he could learn, especially since he doesn't know anything about this new enemy who is capable of killing the Light Wardens. But again, it's all about a mission with him. His motivation to being traumatized by the deaths of generations of Menphilias doesn't seem genuine, at least to me, for two reasons. First of all, those few times that we do see Reen and Ranji together, he doesn't show her any affection or worry. He sounds more like a very controlling father who caught his daughter out of bed too late. And secondly, Reen never talks about him. She doesn't tell us about how he treated her. She doesn't tell us if he ever cared about her. She never said if they ever did things while they were in Yulmore together. She never even says that she sees him as a father figure. Hell, she doesn't even say if she likes him or respects him or cares about him at all. She is definitely afraid of him, but that's about it. Perhaps he's afraid of having his heart broken again, and that's why he's kind of pushing her away, but every time we see him with Reen in the game, he's snide and he talks down to her like she's a child who has no idea what she wants. He gives no indication at all that he cares about her. He just comes across like he's upset and that she defied him and that he wants her back under his control. At least that's my impression of him. Granted, Thancred is also seen to be harsh from her from time to time, but here's the difference. The way that I see it, Ranjit's connections with the previous Menphilias are all kind of one on top of the other. It's gotten to a point that he has in his head this idea of what the Oracle is supposed to be, and that he's unable to separate those memories and which girl is which. The girls, while their personalities were all different, they were all still part of the same person. He decided that instead of fighting and seeing another young girl die needlessly, he took the complacency that Vauthry offered and locked Reen away because in his mind, this was better than seeing her die. After a lifetime of failing to protect the Oracle, he must have felt that he found a way around that. So finally, to him, the Oracle was finally safe. And yes, she was safe, but she could never become her own individual. Her life became defined by Ranjit's memories of the previous oracles that he knew. Now, Thancred is in much of the same position, at least to a certain extent. Thancred cared a great deal about the original Minfilia. He saw her as a member of his family and had looked after her almost like a big brother would do to a little sister. And he has this hole in his life after he lost her. When he learns about the reincarnations of Minfilia, he drops everything that he was doing and he sets out to find her on this solo rescue mission. Now, it had been said in his tale that Thancred had always known that Reen was not the same Minfilia that he knew. The Exarch also warned him before he left that he should not expect a reunion, because this Minfilia is a very different girl. And so Thancred's struggle is that he understands, he realizes that both Minfilia and Reen, while they are linked together, they're not the same person. And so he grew to care about them in separate ways. Minfilia was like a sister to him, and he helped protect her and looked out for her and supported her however he could. But with Reen, she became like a daughter to him, whom he protected and taught her everything she would know and need to know to survive. I think he was just afraid of letting himself open up to Reen too much because he knew that he couldn't have both. His Minfilia spoke to him through Reen and explained this herself, letting him know that Reen would one day have to make a choice that will affect not just her life, but his as well. He had a hard time dealing with the fact that protecting one meant losing the other forever. He tried distancing himself from Reen to a certain extent because he did not want to influence her choice. He cared about Reen enough that he wanted her to make that choice herself when the time came, and he did not want her to make a choice that would make him happy. He probably felt that distancing himself from Reen was his way of caring about her and not influencing her choice, because he knew that day was coming, he just didn't know when. However, Reen misunderstood this as him not caring about her. What she really did not understand, though, is that he did care about her a lot. He showed her the world that she knew nothing about while teaching her everything that he knew, both the good and the bad. He taught her everything about who he was, about where he came from, of the Scions, the Ascians, everything else that he knew. That shows an enormous amount of trust and care. The thing with Thancred is that he expects too much from himself. He didn't want Reen to think her life was worthless, and that he didn't want her to sacrifice herself in a misguided attempt to make him happy, but he just didn't know how to say it, because that would also mean letting go of the original Minfilia. He already saw himself as failing the original Minfilia, and he couldn't bear the thought of failing Reen either. By the end of it, when Reen does make her choice, he gives her a new name, something different from Minfilia. He gives her a new identity, something entirely her own, and that's why I think he chose such a special name. For her to always remember that her life is not worthless, it's a blessing. My own parents are divorced, and I didn't see my dad growing up, but I always thought of it important for a father to have kind of this mindset, always in the back of their mind at least. It's more than just loving your child. You have to be willing to admit when you make a mistake or did something wrong. This is something that Thancred does. He admits to her that he didn't do things the right way, and he apologizes for it, something that Ranjit never did. Thancred will always mourn the original Minfilia, but he has accepted that Reen is her own person, and he's no longer being held back by his memories of the woman he used to know, whereas Ranjit let those memories rule him until the very end. But we're getting off topic here. The point of this video is to discuss if Ranji ranks up there as an antagonist. So, the big question is, what makes a good villain? Well, two things really. Can the villain's plan continue to succeed without a hero? If not, then they are a poorly written character. And secondly, and most importantly, they have to have more than one emotion. If we're dealing with a robot here, we will have a hard time trying to sympathize with them or relate to them when they just have one emotion. The reason that Emet-Selch and Vauthry were such interesting characters is because they had a range of different emotions beyond the I'm evil attitude. And that's because they weren't evil, not really. I mean, Emet-Selch was acting out of grief and love for the home that he lost. Even after so many thousands of years, he cannot stop thinking of it. And after being disappointed in mankind again and again, he had lost all hope of finding anyone worthy enough to pass their legacy on to. but the weight of the burdens he carries was so heavy that you could hear it in his voice. You could see it in how he walks, always with like a slight hunch over as if he's struggling under a heavy burden. As for Vauthry, he never saw himself as evil. He had been raised to believe that he was a god and that he was the hope for mankind. After being told this his whole life and people all but worshipping the ground that his fat butt sat on, how could he possibly grow up to be anything else? In many ways, despite his age, he was still just a huge man-child. That is why he had the name of Innocence in his Sin-Eater form. He honestly was like a big dumb kid who was unlucky enough to have been born to parents who spoiled him rotten. This is what makes them so interesting to watch, because they are capable of showing more than one emotion. They are shown to be angry, sad, frustrated, scared, even happy at times. This helps us to relate to those characters because we know what it's like to have those same emotions. Ranji, however, through all of Shadowbringers, had only two emotions: annoyance and anger. He was clearly annoyed when he first came on screen when he went to speak with the Exarch, and it was clear that he didn't want to be there. He was annoyed with us when we freed Reen and managed to escape from him and his forces. He was annoyed when he confronted our heroes in Ilmeg, starting to lose his temper by the end of it. He was angry in the Greywood and didn't hesitate to kill off his own second-in-command. And he was pissed off in Amnarang when Reen spoke her mind against him for perhaps the first time. And that's it. All through the story, he was never seen as anything other than having a temper. The only other time that he was shown to be anything but angry was near the end when we confronted him in Yulemore. It was like he just flipped a switch. There was no emotion in him. It was like he no longer cared about himself or living. It was like he had just given up on life and was planning for the Warrior of Light to just finish him off after one last stand that he considered to be right. That is not an interesting character. So what could have been done to make him an interesting character? Well, I think a few more Echo flashbacks could give us a connection to him. Maybe a good way to start this was actually show his different relations with some of the other Menphelias that he mentored. Perhaps show some of the memories of some of his battles, like him rallying his men to stand back up and fight against a horde of Sin-Eaters. The best way I can describe him is that he's a lot like Caius Ballard from 13. He was forced to watch the Oracle, a girl named Yule, who ended up dying and being reborn over and over again for centuries. And in the end, he just grew so heartbroken from seeing the girl that he loved continue to die that he tried to stop time itself to spare her from dying again. We see him in that game fight with true conviction, expression with how much he cares for Yule, and even sheds tears for her. I think that he was an amazing character, despite 13 maybe not being the most popular game. I mean, I enjoyed 13, but that's not the point. The point is that so much work was put here, we could have had the same thing with Ranjit and it be just as interesting. Perhaps something else they could have done is that his servitude to Vauthry maybe wasn't completely accepted. And what I mean by that is they could have made it so that he made a deal with Vauthry, like maybe in exchange for servitude, he would keep the Oracle safe and sound for him. Because otherwise, I don't think that Vauthry would have liked a reminder that there was someone out there who would be immune to the Sin-Eater's touch. I personally think he would have been happier just killing her off and being done with it. But perhaps Ranjit learns of this and begs for mercy and offers himself to be his loyal servant if they just keep the Oracle safe. Already this shows us a different side to him, desperate to keep the Oracle alive and safe as well as to why he's so cold with Reen. This could show us how he went from a beloved general who cared about his men and a caring father-like mentor to the Oracle to a miserable and bitter old man we're stuck with. If nothing else, the least they could have done for him was given him a more reasonable explanation of the hopelessness of fighting the Sin-Eaters, which could have been both Thancred and Reen's story for him actually being seen as a real father figure to her. And then there's that whole thing with the death scene against the Warrior of Darkness. It felt pretty anticlimactic when he really should have died in that fight with Thancred. I mean, I get that it's supposed to be an epic final showdown, but it really doesn't feel nearly as satisfying as it would have been with Thancred. I would have liked to have seen them come to some kind of an exchange between the two of them, where maybe Ranjit realizes that he was in the wrong and that he's entrusting the Oracle's fate to him now. Some kind of moment of revelation or understanding. It looks like we got a little bit of something like that before, but really not much else is really there to show it. I like to think that he and Thancred had a moment where they came to understand each other, maybe like fathers, through their fight. Or in the end, you could see that Thancred regretted his death, even though he knew it was necessary. Or, here's another thought. He could have turned out to be innocent, and Vauthry was just his puppet all along. I think that would have made a lot more sense since he's clearly the smart one between the two of them, and it would go a long way to explaining his crazy strain. But then again, that would take away from Vauthry. So where does that leave us? Well, in the end, I think that he was an infuriating, stubborn old man who didn't really give us much. He was true to his own convictions and wasn't swayed by anyone and had a rather anticlimactic death. It's sad because I do think that he had so much more potential that they could have used for him and made him a really memorable, not just an antagonist, but as a character in general. But then again, I mean, if you look at his competition here, I guess it's really not a surprise that he fell kind of short. Anyway, everyone, I think that's it for right now, and what did you think? Do you all agree with my line of thinking? Is Ranjit a wasted character or just a tragic old man? Please let me know down below in the comments, and I'll be seeing you all again soon. If you have any other suggestions about any other characters that you would like me to look more into, just let me know as well. Anyway, everyone, that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and have a good rest of your day.